Hi YouTubers, and welcome back. This is video 4 in the series of how to build a database application using the NSCollectionView for Mac. Now I've done a dry run of this 4th video, and I've got to tell you, if I go through every line of code and you watch me type it, it's going to take about 90 minutes, and nobody wants that. So what I've actually done now is the changes we're going to make in the application. It might look a bit strange right now, but the changes we're going to make to complete the code are all right here in Text Wrangler. If you don't know Text Wrangler, this is a great application for working with pure text. It's available on the Mac App Store for free. And what I've done is I've got the changes I need to make available in these text files for the remaining parts of the application. So this is the ViewController we're looking at here. I've already done these changes. These are the same as what are in the book, and they are the same as what is available in the source code downloads. Now what I have done to Xcode here is I have closed the navigator panel with this button. I have hidden the utilities panel, we don't need that, and the button debug and output panel is hidden. I am showing the assistant editor. These are the files we're going to be writing in and working with over here. And on the left here we've got our all-important data model file, because most of the changes we're going to do now are going to work with that data model, bring data into the application, update things, save things. All those changes, they're going to involve this this data model to some extent. So we'll start off with a quick walk through the data model. I've told you about this bit before. This creates a shared instance of this data model, which protects it against multiple instances being created. Now, you can have as many references to it as you like, but they will all reference the same live instance of this data model object. And you do that by creating a private init method, and you call that private init method inside its class and assign it to a static shared instance. So that's what's happening there. Doesn't matter which file accesses this data model, they'll all refer to the same live object. We've got a flag variable here called data changed. Any of these functions down here that add objects or remove objects or update an object, they mark this flag as true, data changed, and that means that when we get down here to call save array, that will check if data has changed. If that's true, if it has, it will write the file out to disk and it will reset that data change flag. The rest of the init method just sets up the full path to the data file. This will be chapter 17-datafile.xml. It gets that by querying the application bundle name and call to my call to the foundation NS home directory function, which will get my home directory, and it will build that path. If a file exists in this place in string path, then it will actually load that file using the NS file manager. First to check it, if it exists, then it will use a method of the NS mutable array contents of file to actually load that data into the data array. If it isn't, it won't crash, it will just create an empty array. Now, our array objects that will represent each collection view item in the collection view are made up of dictionary objects with a key name and a key contact info. And this will be a string, and this will also be a string. And they're just added and moved around and deleted from that NS mutable array. So, without further ado, we're going to start get coded now. Over here, we have got the controlling class for one of those drop-down sheets, the add new contact controller. And this is where we add new contacts. It's a drop-down sheet and it's triggered by a segue. So if I go over now and look inside Text Wrangler here, I've got my add new controller sheet. What do we do first? Well, we're going to use a delegate object. So I'm just going to copy that, come over here, paste that there. And the delegate object, as an optional, is going to be set in the prepare for segue method. And that will give us a reference back to ViewController. So we can call methods on ViewController via this delegate object. So next change, the button add new function. This, I'm going to copy that and put that over here. That's in here. And we're just going to replace that, pop that in there. Now this, as you can see, this is the first time we actually contact the data model object. And if it was this piece of code that was the first time we contact the data model object, then this part here would actually initialize this object and it will go live because it will get this shared instance. And this shared instance will then be a live object shared by the whole application. That's the whole point of having a singleton class. Now, as you know, we have this add new record function over here, and that is exactly what we're calling over here. We're passing in two strings, the string from the text name field and the string from the text contact field. We pass that over to this function. This function is building a dictionary out of name and info there that we pass in there. It builds a dictionary object and it simply adds that to the data array. Done. Then we need to get a reference to our view controller. As I said, we use this delegate object here. We cast that delegate object to the correct class, view controller. The view controller has this collection view outlet that we created for the entire collection view, and so we can get at that here, and then we can call the reload data method of the NSCollectionView. This is very similar to a table view controller where you reload the data after you make some changes. This will reload the entire collection view, but it does it in a very efficient way, and later we'll look at another way of reloading a single collection view item. So that is actually all we need to do in the add new contact controller class. That is done. We can move on. So we are now going to switch to, and I'm going to use the jump bar up here to switch to the update contact controller class, and we're going to look at those changes in here. So over to Text Wrangler, and first of all we're going to look at how we load data in, because when we start this app now, when we start up and get this update contact controller shown, the user clicks on and selects a collection view item, and then they can either double click on it, we'll look at how you do that, or you can hit that edit button. That will load this view controller as a sheet, and we need to present that data that's going to be edited. So what we do there is we create a dictionary object by pulling an object out of our data array. Now this is the data array, data model shared instance, data array. And our data array is here. And it's an NS mutable array. Mutable means, of course, changeable. So we can change the number of elements in the array. That means add, delete, etc. How do we get a handle on the correct element? Well, when a user selects a collection view item, we are recording that selection here in optional index path. Now there are other ways to record a selection, but the reason I do this is this special variable can record the selection even when a selection view item has gone off screen. In other words, so when we put that blue ring around a selected item, which we will see later, I need a way to remember which one was selected even when they're scrolled out of view. So I record that here in this variable. And we then use that, the optional index path dot item, and that's kind of like a row number for a table view. It's just called an item number here. And then we can pull the correct object out of the array and we cast that to a dictionary. When we have our dictionary out, we can then update the text name field and the text contact info field on the string value by asking that dictionary object value for key and supplying the key name, which is name. And then we do the same again for contact info. So that gets data out of the array as this sheet is loading, and then everything is prepared. Then we're going to have to update it down here. So again, back over to Text Wrangler for a second, and this is the entire update function. We'll just take the whole thing over and talk about that. So we will replace that code there with that. Again, when we update, we need to, first of all, we're going to create a dictionary. So here we are actually creating a new dictionary object. This is called, well, we're just creating a dictionary object and we're naming the keys name and contact info, and we're putting in the values that are in the text field. Now, there is no validation here, so it will accept empty strings. If you do that, you could work some more on this code and put in validation. I'm just being lazy. So we build a dictionary object, and what do we do next? Well, we've got our data model again here, and we have a function called update record. That is here in the data model. That accepts a row as an integer, and it accepts a dictionary object as any object, and all it does is simply replace the current row supplied by this integer with the new data we're passing in here. So we're passing in a complete dictionary object into this, and then we're updating that row or just overwriting it, and then we're setting that data change flag to true. Now, we are going to have a function in the main view controller called reload item at selected path. This is a function that we're going to make. It's not part of anything, but it will call a function with a similar name called reload items at selected paths, plural, and that will be a part of the collection view. But we are asking for this one because we're only working with single items. Our collection view is set to not accept multiple selections. We're only allowed selecting one object at a time. So that's why we're getting a warning here. We're mentioning the name of a function that does not yet exist. Okay, so don't worry about that just yet. Now we are going to go over and find the contact view item. We need to complete this one. Oh, I've already got the data in place. Now, what this one does, just make sure I've got the whole thing. Yep. There. A contact view item is a subclass of NSCollectionView item. This has a property, this parent class has a property called selected. Now, selected can track selections. The collection view itself can also track selected items, but we're using this selected item to also change highlight states. There are some, there's a little bit of talk in the book about the highlight states that don't really work the way you might expect them to work if you've got some experience with table views. According to how you set up a table view, depending on how you set column selection, row selection, etc., table views will actually do some things for you. So when you select a row gets highlighted. When you can select a column, the column will be highlighted, and they will change color and give you visual feedback. the NSCollectionView supplies some of these variable names like highlight states, but they don't actually do anything. So I am combining the functionality for highlighting and selection into this one overridden property called selected. So we use the keyword override here because it is a property that exists in the parent class. Then what we're doing here is we are creating a property observer called DeadSet. Now DeadSet will fire every time this property changes. If it's set to true or false, it will fire this property observer, and we can examine its state. If selected true, then it will change the border color by going into that layer that we saw in the previous video. So it gets the view of the collection view item, digs down into that core animation layer, and accesses the border color and sets that to a bright blue NS color cast to a CG color, which this property expects. If selected has changed to false, then it's lost selection. We don't want the bright blue color. We want to go back to the standard color for all of the objects, and that is the dark gray color. So that's how selection works. Further down here, the other method we have overridden is the mouse down event. Now, this is going to help us get a double click. So you want users to be able to click on single collection view items and select them and make them blue, and then you can go and hit delete or update or whatever. But it would also be kind of intuitive to be able to double click on a collection view item and have that segue fire and bring down that edit sheet. You know, so you can select one just by clicking and not really do anything, but you can double click on one after you've selected it and bring down that edit sheet instead of going up and hitting that edit button. So what this does here is, in this part, it checks for the selected state. If that is true, then call this function EditItem. Again, this is not yet in the ViewController, and we are creating a reference to the ViewController in a little special way. We'll talk about that in a second. But we are calling a function that is not there. That's why we're getting this red error here. And we will fix that later by adding that edit item to the ViewController class. Now, one point to make here, it is very important to call the super mouse down event when you override this and just pass in the same event there. And that is because if you forget this one, you won't be processing single clicks. So if this is not a double click, we want to make sure that we're still processing single clicks in the super. So that's great. Now this part is the special way. Notice we don't have a delegate here. I haven't put any delegates on this, but this is a collection view item. It will be together with several collection view items in a collection view. Now, self is referring to this class, of course, and a collection view item is aware of its surrounding parent view. In other words, its collection view. So it has a property for that. So it says self, my collection view, and the collection view, as you know, it has a delegate. We created that delegate for the NSCollectionView delegate protocol, and we also created the NSCollectionView data source protocol, added those to the ViewController class, and we assigned the delegate protocol to this property. And that means that delegate here is actually referring to our ViewController. So by encapsulating all this in parentheses and casting to ViewController, this again is just like a delegate object that you saw in the previous two classes, and it refers to the ViewController, and we make the cast just to be absolutely sure, and then we are attempting to call a method on that class that isn't there yet. Now we've got 2 errors here. I think I might just be missing yeah, I was missing a right curly brace. Now this error will go away when we get that edit item method set up. So what do we need to look at now? We are going to take a look at the app delegate. There's not a lot of code in this one, it's just these two. This is a function we've already got that I'm going to replace, and this is a new function. So copy that, go up here to app delegate. Now, I haven't removed them, so we don't need to paste those in. Now what we're doing here, application will terminate. This is a notification sent to your app when it is quitting, when it is about to terminate, and terminate nicely. So it sends this, and you can do cleanup code, whatever, or most importantly, you can save your data. Now this is again digging into the data model, the shared instance, and it's calling that method down here, save array. And the array then checks to see if the data has changed, and if it has, it will write that data out to disk and overwrite the previous data. This method is one I like to keep around as a code snippet actually. I mentioned this very early on in the book. This one says application should terminate after last window closed. Now what that means is that when we go and hit the red button, instead of just hiding the window, it will actually terminate the application, and it will do it in a orderly fashion, and that will actually call this method when you hit the red button when this is in place. All you do is return true, and that's just saying yes, I want to terminate this application when the last window is closed, and the last window is the only window, so it will terminate. If you stop the app by hitting the stop button, that is actually crashing the app, and the code never gets to this part. So I like to include that to terminate the app nicely. Moving on, we are now going to tackle the big one, the ViewController. Now this is pretty much how things looked when we left off in the last video, although I have now created the IB action methods for the last three buttons. So we'll just go ahead and take a quick look at the storyboard so you can see what we're talking about here. We've got this one. Notice it highlighting there. We've got the action method for the delete button. We've got the action method for the sort button. And we've got the action method for the button cancel selection. The other two buttons don't have their own code. They don't have action methods. All they do is trigger those segues over here and open the corresponding sheets. So that's that. Back to ViewController Swift over there. Oh, sorry, back to the data model, I should say. And let's get rid of that navigator panel. Now then, there are quite a few changes to make here. The first one is we want a convenient little constant here that refers to this data model, so we don't have to keep typing data model shared instance. Now we have a reference to it there. So what other changes do we need to make? Let's go over to Text Wrangler and find out. There is our ViewController file. There's the first change in place. Now, SaltCollectionView. That again is a function that does not yet exist, but we're going to call it two places. Here, when ViewDid loads, SaltCollectionView will sort this data array that's in our data model. So it's just going to sort, and it's going to sort on the name property of that dictionary. And by putting it here in ViewDidLoad, it will actually load that data sorted. Great. Now here, I don't need to refer back to that. We were returning the hard-coded value of 10 before, so now we're just going to return dm. This is that new local variable we just created in the class, and it is going to be our data array dot count. And so now we are no longer just returning hard-coded values. We're telling the collection view just how many items are in our data source array. Okay, over to Text Wrangler. That was that bit there. Now for a big one. This is the item for represented object at index path. Now this includes all the changes, so I'm just going to grab all that, the whole function, copy that, come down here and replace everything there, and then we'll just quickly walk through that code. Okay, this is going to start presenting live data from our data source array. So first of all, we ask the collection view itself to create us an item just like we did before. No changes there. Item is now a collection view item cast to our subclass. Then we need to pull a data item out of our array, and this is of course a dictionary. So we use this parameter over here, index path, to be able to pinpoint the correct element of that data array in the model. Again, we're talking about this one over here, and we are asking for a dictionary item out of that array element, and we cast it here. And now we have dict as a dictionary item. Here I create two strings, and those strings are, now we're doing things in reverse to what you saw before. We are pulling data out of the dictionary objects now. So we're saying dictionary, give me the value for the key name, the key named name, and cast that to a string, because they'll be coming out of this dictionary as any object. So we need that cast as string there. We assign that to this string variable, and then this is just for convenience. We could actually put all that line right here and replace that. But this is how I did it in the book, and this is how I'm going to show you. So again, let string contact equals dictionary value of a key, contact info, cast that to a string. Then we fill out the labels on the contact item. We have two labels there. They're hooked up, and then we set the colors there, which we already did before. We got the light grey background colour, we got the regular dark grey colour around the outside, we got the border width and this corner radius. Again, we're doing it on the layer property. And if you don't remember how we did that, you're going to have to go back to the earlier videos, probably in video number 2, where we saw how to set up this layer so it's accessible. Then we got this new stuff here, selection tracking. I told you about this variable here, optional index path of type NS index path as an optional. This one says this item that we are pulling out of the array, is this the previously selected item? If DM optional index path item is not nil, then it was an item that was selected. It could be that it's scrolled out of view in the collection view, and now it's scrolling back in, and that's why we're asking the collection view to give us this represented object. And we're just checking, is this one that we clicked on before? If it is, we are setting that item property selected to true, because this does not get persisted when it's coming in and out of this this queue of objects. So that's why we do that there. And if it's not the selected object, we ignore this and we just return that item with this data in place in the item. And back to Text Wrangler here, and now we're going to take two CollectionView delegate methods in one go here. I'm just going to copy these two, and we're going to paste those in right here. The first one, now this does handle selection, and it does so that we can record that optional index path there. It's called CollectionView did select items at index paths. Now notice this is plural. This is a set, a Swift set containing index paths. Now we have set up here somewhere that our collection view does not allow multiple selection. It only collects. It'll only let you select the one. But this is how this function works. It expects a set, and so we have to supply a set. It also means that when we are trying to look for a single item in the set, there will only be one because of our allow multiple selection is set to false, and so that one will be the first set. So that's how we access the one and only set in our collection of sets there. Our one and only index path in our set collection, and we assign that to this local variable path. And I keep saying variable, I know it's a constant, but what the heck. We then record that NS index path to the data model to the optional index path. If for some reason nothing was selected, I want to see a printed debug statement. It could be that you're clicking too fast and you didn't quite get things selected, whatever. I just want to see some debug output if this doesn't work as I want it to. The opposite to this one, did select items, is called CollectionView did deselect items. Now this one is fired. Imagine you click on the very first CollectionView item in the CollectionView. This one will fire did select item. You then go and click on something else. This one will fire to remove the first selection. Again, it's working with a set of index paths, so we do the same thing, but this time down here, we're not interested in that local path variable. We are just making sure that something is selected on index paths first item in index paths, and then we are setting that optional index path value back to nil, so we are just cancelling the selection in this one. Okay, moving on. Right, reload item at selected path. Now this is called by our update sheet. So I'm just going to copy that and then we'll talk about it. We'll put that down here. There. It's a function we've made. It's just called reload item at selected path. Now what we're doing here is we're asking the CollectionView to reload a specific item. Again, this expects a set collection of NX index paths. This one is telling us, again, this is over here, this is our recorded selection. This will be selected, otherwise we won't be able to show that update view sheet. So we know there is one selected. We create a path set, an empty path set on this line, because this function requires a set of paths. So we create a path set and then we just insert that one path that we have over here into that set, and then we can call CollectionView reload items at index paths. And what that does is, instead of refreshing the entire collection view, it will just refresh the single collection view item that has been updated by the update sheet controller. Back to text Wrangler. Now the delete button, we're going to handle that now. We just need the stuff inside there. Back to Xcode, and there's our delete button there. It's already wired up. I'm just going to paste that code in. First of all, you can only delete something if it is selected. What we are deleting is, of course, a collection view item from the collection view. You're deleting a contact from the contact database. So this starts out by launching a guard statement. It says that if this index path is not nil, do something else, otherwise return. So get out of this entire function if there is no selection. You cannot use the delete button if there is no selection. If there is a selection, we get here. So we need to pull an item out of that array. and I've forgotten as NS dictionary there. So we'll pull an item out of that array and make a dictionary object. We then get the values out of the dictionary object keys here, dictionary value for key name, because we need these two strings because we are going to present an alert. We want a confirmation alert dialog here. So we start by creating an alert. We present the alert with two buttons, delete and cancel. So we call these add button with title methods to create an alert with two buttons. Then we use the alert informative text to ask the user, are you really sure you want to delete this contact? Really delete string name, new line, and contact question mark. You'll see this all working in a minute. And then we've got this title text, message text property of the alert that says delete contact. Then we present that alert and show it. And we call it by calling run model in an if statement, because this method here will return an integer, and 1000 is the first button added. So that says if the user clicks on delete, this will indeed return 1000 to this if statement here, and that means we're going to execute this body of code. All we do here is call the data model delete record with that optional item number, and the delete record function is down here in the data model. So that just says data array, remove object, add index, and it passes in that row number. Again, it changes the data change variable to true, so the save functions have got something to do later. So after we delete an object from the array, we need to reset that index path back to nil because nothing is selected now if we just deleted it. And then we change the backing data, so the collection view and the data array are now out of sync. So we need to call reload data to refresh the entire table view and keep things up to date. So that's that part done. And we're going to go down here now and get ready for some new code. Back to Text Wrangler. And we're going to look at the sort button. Now this is very simple, deceptively simple, because we've got this function here called SaltCollection So we're just going to copy the contents of this method here, go over and paste it in that sort button. Now the first thing that happens here is the sort button also toggles the sort order. Remember, we got that flag variable up here. There. This controls the sort descriptor order, it says. Now this is a Boolean value saying sort ascending true. Sort ascending false will mean it will just reverse that sort order. So those two kind of switch the sort order every time you click on the sort button. Then we call this function that we haven't made yet called SaltCollectionView. We're going to get to that in a minute. Again, when you sort the data array, the collection view doesn't know about it, so you have to call CollectionView reload data. That's that bit done. And back to Text Wrangler. And then we're going to do this cancel selection. Now, that is for the third button that we have wired up, button cancel selection. I'm going to pop that data in there. And we're just going to take a quick look at that. It says if something is selected, if that's not nil, then something is selected, then we're going to get a reference to an item. Now the collection view itself as item at index, and so we can supply that with our recorded index path. So we get item at index, that becomes our selected item. The actual selection property doesn't know anything about it being selected until we access this. So we then set item selected false. And then we reset the recording we've made of that item path number. So that's all that does, and it will, you'll see later, it does deselect any items that are selected. Okay, just close that up a little bit. And now we're ready for that sort function. and we're here. Now we call this two places, in view did load and from the sort button that we just made. So we're just going to copy that and we're going to come back here and we're going to paste that down there. Function SaltCollectionView. Now arrays are sorted using something called a sort descriptor. And when you sort an array using sort descriptors, there you can see there is the plural descriptors. It needs an array of sort descriptors because you could be sorting on multiple columns in a table or multiple items in a collection view. So it accepts an array. That means we have to first build a single descriptor and then pop that single descriptor into an array of descriptors. That's what's happening here. So we say let descriptor equal, and then we build this new NSSort descriptor. We supply it with a key name that we will be able to look up in that dictionary. So we provide the name, and then we say what order do we want to sort ascending, and that is whatever order this is currently set at. If it's Boolean, then true. And so ascending here, you would supply a value true or false. So we're just supplying it with this data model value here. Then comes the all-important selector. Now the selector is a bit tricky to get this, the syntax right here. You start with #selector and you encompass a string parameter in this. So this is a parameter of an NS string object called case insensitive compare, and we do not need anything that would normally be in those parameters there, in those parentheses, sorry. So you just add an underscore and a colon, and you call it like that. Now that has built a single sort descriptor. Down here we build an array of sort descriptors. Then we append the sort descriptor to the array of sort descriptors, and then finally we ask that array to sort itself using that array of sort descriptors. Selection cannot survive resorting this array. So here we go ahead and cancel that index path recording we have in the data model. So we set that back to nil. No items are currently selected or being monitored. There. Getting back here now. Okay, the EditItem function. Again, this is a homemade function just like this one. This is called when we double click. You may remember that we added the mouse down. We overrode the mouse down event on the collection view item, and we looked for a double click event. When that double click event was detected, we called this function through a delegate object in this view controller, and all that does is call perform segue with identifier. In other words, it's code that fires a segue, and the segue we're about to fire here is the show update view controller. So this is the code that when you double click on a collection view item gets called, performs a segue, and down comes the update view controller as a sheet. I think we're making pretty good time this time. Now we are gonna supply the prepare for segue method, and you will probably remember why we need this. These two sheets, the update view controller and the add new view controller, both have that delegate property that enable those drop down sheets to access code in this main view controller. So we fire the we override the prepare for segue method. That gets called as the segue is fired. We check the segue identifier here. Is this the show update controller segue being fired? If it is, we get a quick reference to the destination view controller and cast it to the correct class, and it has a delegate property and so we assign self to that delegate. Now this is complaining here, and it could be because we forgot the delegate object, or I forgot the delegate object on the update view controller. So I will just take a quick look at that. And I did, so we need to write var delegate colon any object and question mark. So that will make this error go away and the other error go away back in the view controller. There, we're happy. We do the same thing down here if it is the other segue that's being fired. If segue identifier is the show add new controller, we get a local reference to the destination view controller as NVC, and we cast that to the correct class. We are then able to assign this class view controller as the delegate object for that sheet when it gets shown. Now we also need to be able to cancel segues, and that will come here. We've got this function here that we are overriding, and that is override function should perform segue with identifier. That is a question. Should I perform this segue? Now the reason we're going to ask that and react to it is because if a user hits that edit button in the main view and they don't have a collection view item selected, that will cause problems. So should perform segue with identifier expects a Boolean return value. So we check that identifier string that's passed in here. So we check that, is that equal to show update controller? If it is, we need to check that optional index path. If that is nil, then we're going to say return false here, and return false means do not let this segue fire. So we cancel that segue by returning false if we do not have a selected collection view item. If it is this segue, and there is something set on this, we know we have an object selected, so we can pull something out of the array and show it in the update view controller. Therefore we return true here. And the rest of this part down here, the else clause to this first if statement, that just means if this is not the show update view controller, then it must be the add new controller, that one there. So just return true and let that go ahead and fire as normal. Now I'm going to hit Command B now here and compile this and hope I haven't made any mistakes or forgotten anything. Hopefully we will get build success. And there it is. And I might have some data lying around in my home folder from the last time I made this chapter 17 app, but we'll run it and see what happens. If we get any data showing up in the collection view, it's because I have an old file lying around, but it can also start with 0 data, of course. And there we have these users there. So I do have this XML file, chapter 17-datafile.xml. That must be in my home folder, and that's why we're getting these users here. Now, what can we do? Cross your fingers. Can we select? Yes, we can. The items are turning blue, and these methods are firing in the background as we make selections and deselect, etc. If you want to see how this works in the background as you're doing things, then do like I do, and I'll just stop that. And you see now, because we changed the way the app delegate class works, that actually closes the app with the red button and it gets saved. Now, what I was going to say before was as we select items and we want to see them getting deselected and things like that, we can add some debugging print statements here, db print, and we'll just paste that in there. and bring up the debug panel, run this app again. And so now when I select something, when I now click over here, deselect was fired on this one, and we got our debugging print statements. So I really like to do that with a lot of functions to see the flow of the app and see what's happening, because you don't always get a sense of what's going on when you're clicking around in here. But what can we do now? We can cancel selection with that button. That was wired up. Selection is now gone. The edit button should not work when nothing is cancelled. No drop down sheet there. Select something, we get the edit button, we can edit and change. See if we can change that phone number there. Update, there you go. The update button works. We can add new users. This guy called Matthias here, and his number is 555-9898, and we're going to add Matthias there. And where did Matthias end up? He ended up there. So we better be able to sort, and we can. Now we're sorting in reverse order from Z to A. Remember, the sort button also reverses that sort sequence on the descriptors. Now we've got sorted A to Z. Can we delete an item? Let's get rid of John. Here's our confirmation from that alert box. Really delete John with that number? Yep, John is gone. So we can pretty much do just about everything with this. If you wanted to customize this application, make it into something of your own with more fields, then all you have to do is change the number of labels, of course, in this CollectionView item, and you need to change the design of the dictionary object. When we add a new record here in the data model, we're only passing in 2 strings. You can expand on this and make it any number of strings or other data types that you like, and you're just going to change the design of that dictionary there. So it could be name, telephone, email, whatever. You can just customize it the way you want. You've also got to remember and go back to the other views that create a dictionary object and change the number of elements in that dictionary there. Get those key names sorted. That was it, and I think we managed it a lot quicker than before doing it this way. Thanks for hanging in there. I hope you've enjoyed working with this series. Remember, everything is in the book, Programming Swift, Mac Apps 1. The source code is for free, available on our homepage, appsmith.dk. Go and visit that. We've got a Facebook page now. If you give that a like, you'll get updates on future videos, future books, and anything else we might be doing that might interest you. And I promise I won't be spamming you. It'll be a couple of updates once or twice a week. And yeah, take care. That's the end of this series. Bye for now. I'll be coming back with another video as soon as I can. Have a great day. See ya.